The worst thing in the world would be for you to say, I want to raise a little Satan. No one wants to do that. You don't want that. You don't want that in your children. In the previous message, we talked about building character and responsibility in your children. And we also talked about good discipline coupled with love. Those are great principles as parents to build into how you parent. That I want to praise the things that show character and responsibility. Those are the things that get accolades in our home. And then I want to make sure my children know how to control themselves. They can rule over their spirit. And I want that discipline. I want to teach them to discipline themselves, and by telling them no, by telling them that there are good things and bad things, but that needs to be done in love. I care for them, so I want them to know the difference between good and evil. And the principle we're going to talk about today is spend quality time with your children. And I know that sounds very fancy, spend quality time with your children. But the reality is you need to spend some time with your children. And it needs to be quality time. Lisa and I, very early in our child rearing years, took this piece of advice. And we didn't have a lot of money and almost no money. But we had listened to this video series and had said, we're going to try to implement these things into what we do in our parenting. And we went probably the first 6 or 7 years of our marriage. We had children, the oldest of which was probably 5, and we had twins that probably would have been 1 or 2 years old at this point in time. And we decided we were going to take a vacation. We had never taken a vacation before. And by vacation, I mean where we go and we do nothing except time with family, to spend time together. And we went and we loaded up the vehicle with bicycles, and we stayed in kind of a little cabin that had screen around it, and we ate sandwiches out of an ice chest. And what I'm trying to tell you here is it doesn't take a lot of money to do what it is I'm talking about. I'm talking about spending quality time with your children. Your children are out there riding a bicycle, but they know that this is about them. This is together as a family. And I'll also tell you that as a family, it's where you bond together. It's where you build memories together. All that, it's spending quality time with your children. Tell you another thing, Bud Hulsey talked about this in his video series as well, and we took the technique and adopted it in what we do. If you've ever read the book, Love Languages, there's 5 different love languages. One of those love languages is touch. And I don't know about you, there are other people that have other love languages. But in our family, getting your back rubbed is a special moment. But let me tell you what my wife did, and it really goes back to what Bud Hulsey recommended to us as very young parents. When our children were very small, we would go in to them at night and we would say, we called them night-night prayers or bedtime prayers, and we would say prayers together with them as children. And I could still repeat some of those prayers because they were repetitious prayers that we prayed the same basic phrase night after night after night. But one of the things my wife did is my daughters would lay on their stomach and she would rub their back at night. And we got that from Bud Hulsey. Bud Hulsey said that he laid down every night and his mother would rub his back or would visit with him, and that was time between him and his mom, or he and his dad if the case would be, but in this case his mom. And he said when he got to be about 16 to 18 years old, he made some decisions he really shouldn't have made. And he said there was one person that he told what happened that night. And he told his mom, because it was his mom that came in and rubbed his back every night. And that was their time to talk. We created that with our children. And in fact, now we've created monsters, because I've got a daughter now that talks to, she's married, has children, and she comes home and says, Mom, I need a mommy minute, kind of thing. It's just become a phrase in our home. But what she's saying is, I need some time with my mom. And as a mom and as a dad, we tried to spend quality time with the children. We went on a vacation that didn't cost much at all. It doesn't have to cost much. It's about the time spent. It's about valuing time. And I'll tell you something about children. Children will talk. If you just give children an opportunity, they'll just rattle off everything that's kicking off in their brain. If you don't spend quality time with your children, they won't tell you what they're thinking about. And as a parent, you want your children telling you what's clicking in their brain. You want to know what's clicking in their brain. So we would use some other things, and there were techniques that Bud talked about as well in his video, but I would go pick up the kids from school, and they would jump in the car at the end of the day, and we would drive home. And one of the great lines that worked for us as parents is, what's the best thing that happened today? Not getting into all the negative and, I know this was awful and wasn't school the worst thing ever. You don't want to do that with your kids. What's the best thing that happened today with your children? And ask them that question. Now, another thing I'd recommend to you, sit around the dinner table. Now, when Bud Halsey did these videos, he didn't quote a lot of scripture and that type of thing, but there's principles about parenting that are talked about in Bible. And I think about, for instance, 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse number 12. The sons of Eli were the sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. Now, Eli was a pretty righteous guy, but he had children that were evil. They were sons of Belial. That's essentially like saying they're sons of Satan. I mean, that's like the last thing you would want to think your children would be. Now, I will tell you, I've got a grandson. His name is Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N. And my daughter was expecting Sutton, and they had not released what they were going to name the child, and they had just now released it. She's big, she's expecting this child just almost any time, and they just let us know, we're going to name this child Sutton. Well, we were in the church foyer at one point in time, and my daughter Amy was standing right next to me. Somebody came in to visit our church, and I introduced them. I said, my daughter Amy, she's here visiting from Tennessee, and she's expecting a child, and they have decided to name this child Satan. And apparently, it was the first time that it had rolled off of my tongue, and my tongue had not prepared very well for the name Sutton. And I looked at my daughter and I said, I am so sorry, I don't know where that came from, because Satan apparently rolled off my tongue very easily. But Amy, for the moment, I could see it in her eyes. Her eyes got that big, and it was the very first moment she realized that they just named their son something that close to the name Satan, the difference between Sutton and Satan. And she realized, oh no, we've just named our child Sutton, which is very close to that name. Now I will tell you, Sutton is not an evil child by any stretch. I love Sutton, he's a great kid. But I am telling you, the worst thing in the world would be for you to say, I want to raise a little Satan. No one wants to do that. You don't want that. You don't want that in your children. And yet here Eli had sons, but they were the sons of Belial. They were the sons of evil. They knew not the Lord. That's not the goal that Lisa and I had for our kids or for our grandchildren. We want children that obey God, that believe in God. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse number 22 through verse number 24, Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. How awful would that be, to have children that you're raising that make the Lord's people to transgress, or to not hear a good report about your children? You see, when we came home from school with our daughters, what we wanted to hear was the good thing that happened at school that day. When we talked to their teachers, we wanted to hear the good things that our children were doing. And one of the ways to accomplish that is to build character and responsibility in your children. Good discipline coupled with love, teaching your children to control themselves. And this last point, and that is to spend quality time with your children. You need to get to know your children. They need to get to know you. You need to make sure that you're not hypocritical in that, because children will know. Children are very smart. They'll know whether you're being hypocritical or not. They'll know the truth. But you want to spend quality time with your children, let them get to know you. You need to get to know them. Dads, it's very easy for dads, or maybe moms as well, to be workaholics. I think it's more of a dad thing. Be a workaholic, working all the time. And I want to tell you, I want to caution you today, be careful about that. Spend quality time with your children. Moms, it's real easy sometimes to get distracted into all the other things that you want to be involved in. Be careful. Be careful with the amount of things you involve yourself in, the amount of things that we even do to keep our children busy. Spend quality time with your children.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to make sure you don't miss any videos from the Mended Collective. Do you have any questions or anything you'd like to add about the subject? If you do, leave those comments along with suggestions for future content. Thanks again.